We all know the classic trope of the tragic artist. A creative mind lives in absolute poverty, completely ignored by society, only for their work to sell for tens of millions on auction blocks decades after they die. But art doesn't have a monopoly on this kind of loss. In science, no one embodies the unrecognized genius quite like Gregor Mendel. Mendel died in total obscurity, but the final tragedy came shortly after. Following his funeral, his life's work, thousands of meticulous, handwritten scientific observations, was gathered by local administrators and burned to ash. Long before the world recognized him as the father of genetics, Mendel was the ultimate underdog. He was a man who lost his legacy before humanity even realized he had discovered its biological code. Mendel was born into a family of poor German-speaking farmers in the early 19th century. A formal education was entirely out of reach until his younger sister, Theresia, voluntarily gave up her own dowry just to cover his tuition. Even with that sacrifice, his academic career stalled. Hoping to secure a stable income as a teacher, he sat for his oral examinations and failed. He tried again the following year, and he failed a second time. Running out of options, he took a job counseling dying patients at a local hospital. But Mendel was deeply empathetic, and surrounded by severe illness, he began falling physically ill himself. Seeing his declining health, the head abbot reassigned him to light duty in the monastery garden to recover. During this period, Mendel met a mathematician in Austria who suggested that living things might follow strict mathematical rules. If he had passed his exams, or if he could have handled the emotional weight of the hospital, he would have spent his life in a classroom or a clinic. Instead, his failures positioned him in the exact solitary, nature-filled environment he needed to test his new mathematical theory. Mendel's first plan to study the rules of heredity involved building cages in his room and tracking the physical traits of mating mice over multiple generations. The Abbey elders shut the project down immediately. To them, the study of animal breeding was inappropriate and unholy for a religious space. Banned from using animals, Mendel walked out into the garden and looked at the common pea plants growing in the dirt. He realized he could manually control their reproduction by transferring pollen himself. That single act of religious censorship saved his legacy. By forcing him away from the complex biology of mammals, the elders gave him a simple, easily tracked biological model. To understand his method, we can look at this botanical illustration of a pea plant. Mendel noticed these flowers were either entirely purple or entirely white. So he took a purely purple flower plant and crossbred it with a purely white one. This graphic maps out what happened next. When the seeds from that pairing grew into the first generation of offspring, every single flower bloomed purple. This result was baffling. If a white and purple parent have offspring, the white information appeared to have completely vanished. To test if that trait was truly gone, he bred that all-purple first generation exclusively with each other. The white flowers suddenly returned. By meticulously tracking the numbers, a hard mathematical ratio emerged. Exactly 75% were purple and 25% were white. This was the law of inheritance. Traits don't blend like mixed paint. They pass down as distinct packets of dominant and recessive information. These ratios proved that inheritance wasn't a matter of random chance. Instead, a rigid, invisible mathematical code was dictating exactly how life passed from one generation to the next. In 1865, Mendel published his data. He personally paid to print 40 copies of his research and mailed them to the most prominent scientists in the world, including Charles Darwin. The response was total silence. Biologists in the 19th century simply did not know how to apply advanced mathematics to plant life, and the hard numbers in his report were ignored. Mendel spent his final years embroiled in a bitter dispute over local taxes slapped on religious institutions. At age 61, he died from kidney disease, his scientific contributions still completely unknown. Then came the final and most tragic indignity. Because of the ongoing tax feud with the state, local administrators gathered his remaining documents, notes, and data and threw them into a bonfire. One of the most important breakthroughs in biological history was incinerated over a local bureaucratic paperwork dispute. Despite the rejection, Mendel remained confident in his numbers. Before his death, he told his friends, "My time will surely come. It took 3 full decades, but he was right. In the early 1900s, a new generation of scientists recreated his experiments and found that his mathematical formulas were flawlessly accurate. Every time we discuss DNA, genes, or inherited traits today, we are speaking the language invented by a misunderstood monk who realized that biology is just math in disguise.